Hey everyone, so today I'm posting the part 1 of the Relicblade Paintalong. I'm going to be painting the gun gob that I just showed. These are the supplies that we'll be using for the most part. I think I missed one or two things, but I'll go over that later in the video. Basically, you need paintbrushes, some sandpaper or sanding sponge, a hobby knife, primer, a mini, ideally Relicblade, but like I said, and you can do another mini if you want. And I'm going to use Monument Primer, and this is Metal Prep 4K. I'll go over that later in more detail. Another thing that I will be using personally is Pigment Micron pens. These are just solvent-based little pens, and I think they work really well for black lining. But you can also just use a 2-0 brush, essentially, if you want to. So the first step is just clean up, of course. If you've dealt with metal minis before, you know how it works. Essentially, I'm just going to scrape the mold lines. I try to rock the model back and forth while I do so that you don't get flat spots. It at least helps. And then once you get the mold line scraped down a decent amount, I then go in with sanding sponge afterwards, and I touch that up and just sand it smooth so that it's nice and flush. You don't have to use especially high grit sandpaper, and you don't have to use especially low grit sandpaper either. You're doing the majority of the work with the scraping with the knife. This is really just to smooth it, so like 200 to 400 grit sandpaper or sanding sponge is generally what I go for. The last thing I do, and I didn't mention this in the supply list at the front, is just brush it real quick with a wire brush. This is a steel brush. I don't think you should use a steel brush. Ideally, you should use a brass brush and be kind of careful with it because you don't want to rub away detail. But this just scuffs up the mini a little bit and helps the paint and stuff adhere better. After that, all I'm going to do is mount the mini. You need it mounted in something solid. I'm using a Nightworks miniature holder that I got from a server friend. It works pretty well for this. So before we prime the mini with primer, I'm going to use Metal Prep 4K. What this is essentially a rubberizing agent. It basically just is a clear fluid that you apply onto the model, and it rubberizes the surface a bit and makes it so that paint and primer and stuff will adhere better. If you have problems with paint scratching off of metal real easily, this won't completely fix the problem, but it will at least help with it and make it a little more durable. Once that's dried for a little bit, I make sure to suck up any little like pooling and bubbles and stuff like that. And then this is the only step that I'm going to use an airbrush. I'm just using black brown monument primer. You can just use black. You can use spray can primer, brush on primer. It doesn't matter. I'm just doing it with the airbrush because it's fast. The important thing is to get the primer in essentially every nook and cranny of the model. Since these are metal, anything you miss is going to be really obvious because it'll be shiny silver, and you don't want that. Whenever I'm priming something, I always try to go from below and above and the front, essentially. Like down low, midway, and then up high, so that I can get every nook and cranny. Once I've done that, I'll then go in afterwards and just double check and make sure everything is good and ready to paint. So once you have a nice solid primer coat, it's then time to move on to colors. So just to discuss color theory a little bit, I don't really want to go into it a great deal here because that's not the point of this video or this paint along. But essentially I wanted to use colors that are a little more earth tone-ish kinda. So I'm using a darker blue color. The gory red is going to be for the flesh tone, it's the base color for the flesh. The earth will be for the wood and leather parts. And the gray is for the gun barrel and anything metal, and as well as his hair. And then the green will be for some parts of his clothes. I'll also be doing a little bit of mixing here just to get more interesting different color tones on some parts. For the most part, these are just base coats. Once we get these down, I'll then go on to do the shading and then move on to layering and the highlighting in the next part of the video series. So when I'm base coating, I usually only add 1 or 2 brushfuls worth of water. You can call it a drop if you want, but I just dip my brush in the water and then swirl it around in the paint so that it's thinned. And that's about it. Basically, you just want the paint to flow decently well. It doesn't need to be super thin, it just needs to be thin enough that you can spread it around on the model and get it evenly coated without obscuring a ton of detail. So the first thing I'm base coating here is just the gun stock and the gun barrel. These are just the earth tone and the gray color that I was using. The gray is just a base coat for what's essentially going to be basic non-metallic metal. And then the brown is going to be the base coat for what is a wood stock. And then we'll improve and touch that up later with some lighter tones to add like wood grain effects and things like that. So just to talk a little bit about why I wanted to do this paint-along series video thing is I think it will be interesting to take this step by step. It'll be a slower process for sure, and like I could definitely paint this mini in a single sitting, and I'm sure most of you could do the similar as well for small 28mm like 28mm minis like this. But I think it'll be interesting to look at your guys' work step by step. And that way I can look at what you're doing, you can look at what I'm doing at each stage, and we can maybe learn some things along the way using that process. So I also base coated his feet with the earth color, and now I'm using the gory red color to base coat his skin. I added, I think, a little bit of green to it to desaturate it and darken it a bit. You can do that with any complementary color. So the complementary to red is green, so mixing a little bit of green will desaturate it and make it appear a little bit darker. But this is just a base coat. And from here I'm going to work up to a brighter red at a later time, and then the highlight will be orange. So that's why I'm starting with the dark red. And of course, if anybody has any questions, just let me know. I think I am going to post this publicly, but only people who are subscribers are going to get the feedback and critique and participation in the paint-along, essentially. So all I'm doing with the base coats is trying to get a nice even coat. You don't have to be super clean about it. You don't have to really take your time. In fact, I encourage you to go quickly and just try to get the layers on fast. At this stage, it's not that important because the next stage after this video, the part 2, the first thing we're going to do is wash everything with acrylic washes. That will fill in a lot of the recesses and stuff, and it will also even out some of the unevenness from your base coats. So it's not super important that you get everything really clean and nice in this stage. It's one of the reasons that I use this approach when painting fantasy models in general, is it allows me to go a little bit faster and not focus too hard on being really clean and precise. So I don't have to worry as much, and I can make mistakes and still have a nice looking miniature at the end without as much effort. So in this case, for the pants, I mixed a little bit of blue, just the same blue that I have just applied to his hood and stuff like that. I mixed a little bit of blue with the earth color and just base coated his pants with that. Because the earth color is kind of a yellow brown, it'll desaturate that a bit and make it a little darker. And then after that, I just went in with the gray and base coated his hair, his eyebrows. He has like hair in his ears, etc. So with that, that's pretty much the end here of the part 1. So I encourage everybody to post their progress, base coat your mini or minis, whatever you're painting, and then post the progress in the channel, and we'll go from there. And I will look at everybody's stuff and give you guys feedback and answer any questions you have, etc. If you are watching this video from a public channel or from my YouTube channel, this video is to a series of videos that we're doing for subscribers. You get to essentially follow along this tutorial and then receive direct feedback through private Discord channels on your progress, essentially. So thank you for watching. I'll see you in part 2.